Still, it's important to make these bets in a very deliberate and nuanced fashion. Because somebody else, believe me, there will be somebody else who will make that bet and who might perhaps end up eating your market share because that bet actually turned out to be accurate.
Okay, so I want to take you in a slightly different question. For folks that know me, they know that I am not speechless very often. I'll blather on about anything, and I may or may not know what I'm talking about. But I got asked a question recently that honestly it stumped me. I didn't have a good answer, and so I want to pose it to you, Manas, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The context is I was talking to kind of a mid-size enterprise. I was talking to an executive, C-suite executive of this mid-size enterprise, and they were looking at deploying a set of AI-based solutions in a customer service scenario, right? It was voice and text, and they were basically going to string together a bunch of stuff to create a better experience for their B2B customers to get data to interact with their service. And he asked me a simple question. He's like, why should I bother doing this now? Which would require some integration, some engineering work. When, as far as I can tell, 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months from now, I'm literally just going to be able to have ChatGPT do this for me, right? And what he was getting at is things are moving so quickly that investments today in implementing AI sometimes feel like they may end up being sunk cost and useless because the state-of-the-art advances so far. You have any thoughts on that from the point of view of somebody who advises enterprise decision makers?
Yeah. So I think, looking at the cost-benefit analysis obviously is a good idea, but these costs from the AI providers, whether it's OpenAI or Google Gemini or other providers, that can quickly add up. And I think instead of looking at the short-term benefit, people should also think about it long-term. That's one. Secondly, I do tell companies to think about developing their own intellectual property. Like, for example, I'll give an example without going into specifics. I recently told a company that they should look to fine-tuning a model to develop their own intellectual property specific to their domain.
Was that a tech-centric or a tech company? Or because that makes a difference, right? Versus like a consumer packaged goods firm.
They're a B2B company.
Okay.
But obviously they have a technology solution. Let me put it that way. Yeah, but they're B2B. So thinking about developing intellectual property and thinking about also developing, when I say intellectual property, I don't mean just having patents and whatnot. I also mean intellectual property in terms of their employees. So opening avenues for their employees, for their engineers to work on AI projects and so forth. So that there's a long-term benefit to that as well. Now, I think at some point, what's going to happen is, and this goes back to what I mentioned about GPU cost, because right now these companies, they are also trying to figure out the right mathematical formula for what's the balance between passing on this inference cost, training cost to end users. So a lot of these costs are being passed on, which is why the API cost for OpenAI or Gemini and so forth, it's quite expensive. So I am hopeful that as the GPU training cost perhaps over time comes down, perhaps there are other companies coming up with new chip designs and so forth. Maybe this cost will come down, but we do not know that. Right? So there's also one other aspect to it, which I tell people to think about, and I have myself done this. It's making certain product bets. As a company, it's extremely important, I think, particularly in startups. And this is something I've learned from leaders and other people I've worked with. It's important to make bets sometimes.
Yes.
And these bets may not necessarily fructify. Okay, maybe it did end up to be money down the drain. Still, it's important to make these bets in a very deliberate and nuanced fashion. Because somebody else, believe me, there will be somebody else who will make that bet and who might perhaps end up eating your market share because that bet actually turned out to be accurate.
Yep. That's right. And I love that. There was a Harvard Business Review article, I think in May or so of this year in the spring, that, basically it was about how in times of change and uncertainty, right, you need a portfolio of bets. You need to think like an investor in some ways, right? Or as you say, a product or innovation leader making that portfolio of bets. And I think that is pretty universal truth right now.